What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another edition of the 2-2 Podcast. Listen, I'm so glad and grateful you could be with me today. Today's episode involves one word. One word that has been the cause of heated discussion, a lot of arguments, a lot of back and forth. But we need to talk about it. What better way to do that and just have a little conversation amongst each other. So with that being said, you know the move. Grab your friends, grab your family, grab your coworkers, grab those people you don't like. Oh, and don't forget your notebook, your iPad, and your laptop. See you in a minute. Have you ever wanted to record a podcast but didn't know the way? Well, I've got good news. Let me tell you about something. It's called Anchor. And Anchor is the easiest way to record a podcast. Let me explain. It's absolutely free. There's creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or your computer. Anchor will distribute your podcast for you so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcast, and many more. You can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. And it's everything you need to make a podcast in one place. So here's what I need you to do. Please download the free Anchor app or go to Anchor FM to get started. What's going on, everybody? Welcome to today's episode. I can't go any further without thinking about how heavy a day today is. How we're still in pain. We're still in shock. We're still in anguish. We're still just really trying to come to grips with this day. Today marks the 1-year anniversary of the loss, the tragic loss of Kobe and Gigi and 7 other people in a helicopter crash. And, you know, I'll tell, before we go any further, I'll just kind of personally tell just like my story of that day. I'm just getting out of church, and something rolls across my phone. Well, actually, I was on Instagram, and something rolls across my phone that says, Kobe Bryant in a helicopter crash. And you don't expect the worst. You know, if you're optimistic, you're not expecting the worst to happen. You're not expecting when I was thinking helicopter crash, I was thinking, helicopter made a hard landing, maybe some minor injuries. That's it. But when I got the news that it was more than that, I mean, to this day, I'm still in shock. I'm still still stuck for some reason. I mean, that goes without saying. Kobe Bryant was one of the greatest basketball players of all time. And, to lose such a gift to the game, and then to see that his daughter was with him, and to see that so many people lost their lives, or the countless lives lost in this tragic helicopter crash, was it still to this day, it's branded in the memory of so many people. Today's episode is about accountability. And Kobe really did his best through his work on the court and off the court, through being a father, being a husband, being a coach, being a producer, being a philanthropist, being a developer of young people. He taught the importance and the value of accountability. And we can all learn this lesson through his life and his legacy. We can all learn about the value of accountability. So, this episode is in tribute to Kobe, Gigi, and the 7 lives lost on this day last year. May they forever rest in peace. Accountability. I just want to know why it's such a triggering word to talk about. It has been the cause of a lot of arguments. It's been the cause of a lot of backfighting. Just a lot of fighting and a lot of chaos, especially on social media. But it's something that needs to be talked about, discussed, and then implemented frequently. And today, I wanted to take a little time to talk about it, just for a little bit, because we all need to be accountable about things in our lives that we're not generally accountable for. But before we get into today, let me be transparent. For a long time, I had an issue with accountability. I had an issue with accountability. And it was, I don't want to blame it on, how I grew up, but I always wanted to use a certain situation that happened as the reason why I did what I did. Oh, well, this happened in such and such and such and such, but there was a point in my life, and I have to thank one of my mentors. I had a basketball coach. His name was George Hunter. His name is George Hunter. And shout out to Coach Hunter. One time I was giving my grandmother a lot of grief. Was getting in trouble in school. Grades weren't that great. And Coach Hunter pulled me in the gym one time. No, pulled me out of the gym and pulled me in. There's a conference room at this particular YMCA that he worked at. He pulled me in this conference room. And we had a talk. And that talk was about being at the age of accountability. The age of accountability. And he basically said to me that you're at the age of accountability where you have to stop blaming other people about the things that you do and start taking account of all that you do. You got to stop blaming mom. You got to stop blaming dad for not being there. You got to stop blaming, brother and sister. You got to stop blaming this person. You got to stop blaming that situation. Yeah, those are factors. But there's a point in your life where you cannot allow what other people did to you to define you. You have to hold yourself to a higher standard. You have to say to yourself, when nobody says it to you, I'm holding you to it. I'm holding you to it. One of the things that I've had to learn in the last few years is holding myself to the things that I said I wanted to do. And one of the biggest things, in a lot of cases, that we don't often do, and this is not relegated to any gender, this is not to attack one single gender, this is for everybody. One of the biggest things that we don't do is we don't do a good job of holding ourselves to a higher standard, or holding ourselves to accomplishing something, or holding ourselves to actually healing from some pain and some trauma in our lives. We don't hold ourselves to that standard, and we don't hold ourselves to that responsibility. See, there are two periods in your life. There is the age of accountability and the age of responsibility. You learn about the accountability period from the time you're born. Not from the time you're born, or maybe and a little bit later. You learn about accountability. You learn about responsibility as well. And this was broken down to me this way. There's the age of accountability, the age of responsibility. You learn about accountability early. And they're intertwined within those lessons about accountability are those lessons about responsibility. Your ability to respond. See, when you are accountable, let's break those two words down. This is why, if you've seen the logo for this episode, there's account and ability, and a slash in the middle. When you break these two words down, account, to take into account all that you all that you do, all that you've done, and all that you continue to do. It's your ability to do so. It's your ability to take into account all that you do. That is when you break down accountability. But the Webster's definition of that is this: is the fact or condition of being accountable. Here we go. Responsibility. Your ability to respond to a situation. Oftentimes talk about E plus R equals O. Event, response, outcome. There are times in our lives and events where events happen. Events happen all the time. What is your response going to be? How do you respond to a situation? Because your response to that outcome, a response to that event, determines the outcome in the end. How will you respond to an event? How will you respond when you've been hurt? How do you respond when somebody has did you wrong? How do you respond? You are accountable and responsible for your response. I know that sounds redundant. You are accountable for your actions. You're accountable for all that you do. You're accountable. And like I said before, we've had and continue to have heated discussions about this one word in this practice, and who should be more accountable. We ask these questions: who should be more accountable? Why isn't one side more accountable than the other? But I want to ask a question. We're all responsible for our actions. But why don't we take the initiative to do so? Instead of saying, oh, men should be more accountable. And yes, we should. We should. Oh, women should be more accountable. And yes, everybody should be more accountable, regardless of where you are in life. Let me just jump right here and say this, that everybody should be more accountable. Nobody should be pointing the finger at anybody about who's more accountable and who's not more accountable. When we all should be more accountable about how we respond to people, be more accountable about what we do, who we hang around, who we surround ourselves with, who's giving us advice about our health, mentally, physically, our financial health. We should be more everybody. This is not just for men. This is not just for women. This is for everybody. And there are going to be some people that listen to this episode and get triggered and get upset. Oh, well, you need to jump on me. You need to tell men this, and this. No, I'm not. I'm telling everybody. And why am I telling everybody? Because I've had, once again, at the beginning of this episode, I literally just said that I had an issue with accountability. And even with that lesson that I got from a coach, I still had issues with accountability. See, here's the problem. Sometimes we get fearful of what will happen if we're accountable, if we hold ourselves, if we're accountable to of our actions, if we become accountable. I know I jumbled that together. I'm talking fast and going from. We're scared of the outcome. That's one reason why we don't hold ourselves accountable for our actions. We're scared of the outcome that could happen. We're scared that we'll lose a friend. We're scared that we'll have to do something new. We're scared that the dynamic of a relationship will change. We're scared that something, we're just scared. Because nobody wants to lose a friend. Especially when you've had for years. Nobody wants to lose that. But there's a point in your life where you have to take inventory. You always hear me talk about inventory and inspection on this show. Account, inventory, and inspection of everything around you. And if it's not serving you, if it's not serving a good purpose in your life, there's a point right now where you have to hold yourself accountable to remove that part from your life. I appreciate it. You've been great at times. And you don't have to say this to a person. But here it goes. You don't have to say this to anybody. But you have to be accountable that you under promise and over deliver. And that if it's not serving you, if that thing is not serving you serving a good purpose in your life, and that person is not serving a good purpose in your life, that you have to quickly remove it. Is healing from a situation going to take time? Absolutely. Is healing from what a person hurts you going to take time? Absolutely. But you will not heal if you're not, here's the word again, accountable. You have to be accountable you have to be accountable and responsible about stirring the gifts up in your life. God has given us all a gift, a purpose, and we're called to that purpose. for our life. You have to stir up the gift. First Timothy says that. First Timothy, let me get it right. I don't want to quote something and get it absolutely wrong, because I've had plenty of times where I've done that. But you have to be willing you have to be willing to be accountable about stirring up the gift as Second Timothy. I'm sorry. I told you I didn't want to get it wrong. As 2 Timothy 1:6-7 says, to remind you to stir up the gift of God which is in you. And we cannot be fearful. God has not given us the spirit of fear, but of power and love and a sound mind. We have to be accountable. There's an accountability in making sure that our mind is sound and that we're not fearful of the results that may happen. Yeah. You have to be accountable and be held accountable. And and sometimes it's not by other people. You have to hold yourself to that. You have to be willing to raise your standards. And tell yourself, I'm holding you to this. I'm holding you to this standard. I'm holding you to this place that you will do the necessary and vital things to become much better than you are, and be in a better place than you are. There's no need for the argument about being accountable. There's no need for the argument about who should be more accountable when we all should be more accountable. And as I talk about accountability, I will talk about accountability as a male just for a second. And especially when it comes to surrounding yourself around people. There was a situation that happened. Just a vile, sick situation that happened. I believe last week. There was a young lady minding her business. Not doing much. Just but minding her business. And a guy tried to, wanted to get to know her, tried to talk to her. And she rejected him. And she rejected. This is not the same situation that happened. Oh, this is the same situation, almost the same situation that happened, except this one got a little bit crazier. This was, there was another situation before this where a young lady got hit in the face with a skateboard because dude said no. Because she said no to the guy. Because he wanted to talk to her and she just wasn't comfortable. She just said, no thank you. Just trying to mind her business, going her way. And he got mad and hit her with a skateboard. That was a situation that happened earlier. That happened last year. In the height of what was going on with racial tension, where we needed to come together and unify as black men and black women. Another situation that happened this year where a young lady was attacked by a group of men because she said no thank you. She didn't want to talk to him. She didn't want to get to know him. She didn't want to do that. And that wasn't rude. She just didn't want to get to know him. And so they attacked her. And I have a problem with that. I really didn't say much about it. But the situation's been imprinted on my mind since I found out about it. And I think about that. And I think about the fact that, us as males, especially black men, have a responsibility to learn the value of no. We have to be accountable for that. We have to be held accountable. We have to be held accountable for our actions. We have to be held accountable for our response when somebody says no. We have to hold ourselves to that. The no doesn't mean, you lash out. Because oftentimes when we're not taught about the value of a response, we will lash out at the most minuscule things. And we have a responsibility to learn the value of responding in a healthy manner. We have a responsibility to learn how to respond in a healthy manner to a no. I've told you before, I've had rejection. I've had issues with abandonment and rejection. I didn't know how to respond to that. I wouldn't physically put my hands on anybody. But, I had a hard time handling when somebody said no. And that was based on what I went through in life. But there was a point in my life where I had to stop blaming everything on the past. And get healing from that. There was a point in my life where I said, enough's enough. I can't do this. I can't stay in this spot. I have to do better. I have to be greater. I have to be in a point in my life where I go, look, it happened. It is what it is. Move on. It happened. The person said no. It is what it is. Move on. But in the middle of moving on, there's a period where you have to heal. Moving on, for me, doesn't just mean pushing it to the side of my mind to collect dust and to fester and to become worse than it is. And then some point in my life I get hurt and that trigger comes on. No. That means when I say move on, I'm healing in the process. Fellas, especially my black kings, my black brothers, we have to learn the value of accountability and responsibility when it comes to rejection. I understand that you have been hurt. I understand that, people have told you no. But there's a point in your life where you go, you know what? Not a problem. And not saying that this young lady was, crazy and whatnot. But, sometimes when people say yes to us and we say yes to some certain situations, we just don't know what we're getting ourselves into. We don't know people. And in her case, I believe she said no. Not because she didn't want to, because she read energy. And everything she read came to pass. She read their energy. She knew what she was getting into. But she was strong enough to say, you know what? I stand by what I said. I said what I said. And no, I don't want to talk to you. No, I don't want to get with you. Learn the value of a no. And move on. And in the midst of moving on, be accountable for whatever trauma you've had in your life. that is still hurting you to this day. If you hold yourself accountable to heal from any past pain that you had in your life where somebody told you no or somebody rejected you. Now I'm speaking to everybody. You're going to get told no a lot. And you have to learn the value learn the value of a no. I've said this before, and I have to say it again because we have to be accountable for this, for our own actions. We have to be responsible for our responses. Events happen. Rejection happens. But what will your response be? And you have to take into account that response. I know I keep repeating myself, but it needs to be said in spite of the redundancy. What will you do in this moment to be accountable? To stir up the gifts in your life that God has placed in your heart and in your spirit. The gifts that you have. What will you do to be accountable? And hold yourself to healing and recovering from any pain, past and present. What will you do to be accountable? To remove anything that doesn't serve a purpose in your life in a positive way. Stalled relationships, stalled friendships, stalled jobs, stalled anything that is stalled, that does not need to move forward. What will you do to be accountable in this season? If you don't learn the value of accountability at this point, you will blame everybody and everything for why you're not where you are. Why you're not further along. When you didn't take the time to take inventory, inspect, confront, heal, and move on. I just want to let somebody know who's dealing with accountability issues. There's liberty and freedom in accountability. When you say to yourself, I held myself to a high standard, and can anybody take it away from me? I held myself to a high standard to become the greatest I could ever be. I held myself to a high standard to open that business, to open that, to start that show, to start that music career, to start that church, to start whatever, to be great, to become healthy, to be a healthier version of me, mentally and physically, to be financially stable, to have a healthy marriage, to have a healthy relationship, to be a good father, a good mother, to be a good parent, period. I held myself to that standard, and I will continue to hold myself to that standard to be the best possible person I can be, in spite of the circumstances and situations around me. Sometimes your best accountability partner is you. It's cool to have accountability partners that call you, hey, you making sure you're doing this? You making sure you're doing this? It's great. But what happens when you can't get a hold of that accountability partner? What happens when you haven't talked to your accountability partner in a couple of days? What happens when the season changes and your accountability partner can no longer hold you accountable? When it's just you. You have to learn how to be your very best accountability partner. Because when it all comes down to it, you have to live with you. You are oftentimes your biggest setback. Your biggest doubter, your biggest critic. There's a Bible verse that says, I find this law and principle to be true. Every time I try to do good, evil is always present. Sometimes I hold me back. But I have to eventually say to myself, it's time to be accountable and responsible for everything that I want to be, that I've been created to be, that I make sure that I get to that point and I continue to stay to that point. I'm not just going to fight to get it. I'm going to hold myself accountable to keep it and progress it and continue to cultivate it and water it and grow it and cultivate it and water it and grow it. This is a growing season. This is a responsibility season. This is an accountability season. And I encourage you as you go into your midweek to find those things in your life and those situations in your life where you lacked accountability. What will you be accountable for in this season? What do you want to be accountable for in this season? I encourage you to do inventory and inspection. Confront those things in your life that you weren't accountable for and you lacked accountability in. I encourage you to take the time to look at it and say, you know what? I have to do better with this. And I have to be consistent about this. What will you do to hold yourself accountable in this season? Hey, listen, thank you for joining the show today. Don't forget to follow the show page and my personal page. The show page is 22_podcast. That is 22_podcast on Instagram. And my personal page at AlexJ_live. That is AlexJ_live. Please don't forget the 22 podcast has merch. That's on 22apparel.threadless.com. That is 22apparel.threadless.com. See you soon.